Rabbi,
Yeah.
I've been thinking about your project that you've been talking about in the last few classes, and one of my first reaction was, "Uh-oh, he's gone Buddhist on us." But I realized that it's really almost the opposite, because the connection you're talking about isn't just like with the universe; it's with others. Anyway,
And
what
God. Don't forget
and
God, the
and God
creator.
and God, right?
That's the
Exactly,
that's the biggest by far difference between
right.
Buddhist and Eastern thought and what we believe. There are elements that are shared, but the capital G, that is the biggest difference.
Okay. Is there a capital Yud? I don't know.
Yes, capital
Yeah.
U. And also, I made it was important to me to quote Rav Shimon Shkop on that, because
Right. I
he
know.
he is
Yes.
he's what
That's
I'm
right.
quoting. He is what I'm quoting over there. So, and his take incorporates the Ramban, because the Ramban, he says that the mitzvah, he emphasizes that the mitzvah of kadoshim tiyu, of being holy, is prisha, which is to limit our involvement in the material world. But he makes it clear that what the Ramban means is, in other words, we are meant to limit our involvement in it and then dedicate. In other words, the limiting our involvement in it is not the ultimate point. The limiting of our involvement in the material world is what allows us to have the energy to focus on our work with others. So he sort of turns it towards that place, and that's how he develops, or out of that is where he develops that notion of ultimately it's about focusing on others.
I see.
And then expanding the I. He actually talks about that, expanding the I. Mm-hmm. But I know it does sound like other things, but remember the God part. That is a big difference. Okay, yesterday we were talking about dressing and acting like idolaters. So it is forbidden to dress in the style of, cut our hair according to, or to act in ways of idolaters. And we did see in a brief review, I just picked one, of the practical laws involved, that it seems like halakhically that it really is connected to idolaters and idolatrous practices. It is not necessarily forbidden to dress like Gentiles. If there is a style of clothing that's considered a kind of modest or serious kind of style of clothing that is popular amongst Gentiles, that is not forbidden. It's clothing associated with religious practices or immodest clothing, or they said
he said
unserious.
ridiculous.
Yeah,
he said
ridiculous. I know,
which that is so funny. I'm trying to think.
I know. There are those who suggest that under the category of modest would be clothing that attracts a lot of attention to your person, that would be considered a modesty issue. So I don't know if he meant that kind of unseriousness. I don't know. It was based on a Ramah for Moshe Isserlish, and if it was really our purpose, we could have looked at the Ramah more in detail, but I feel like we got the basic point of that. Okay. Right. So this prohibition, which is number 31, I don't know what the Arabic is. The Hebrew that they're using here sounds like a word that it sounds like either it could be used for magic or somewhere on that line between what we would call magic and witchcraft. He prohibited us from divination, meaning to say that one moves the faculty of imagination with a type of stimulus, like all those with abilities to say what will happen before it does. Indeed, it comes true for them, since their imaginative faculty is strong, their words mostly come true, and hence they rely upon their predictions, and they will have an advantage with this, like any advantage of the personal skill of some people over others in abilities of the spirit. It's impossible for any of the people with these imaginative faculties without first doing some deed or action which to stimulate the faculty and bring his imaginative activity into effect. Among them is one who strikes the ground with a stick that is in his hand, repetitive strikes, and yells unusually, ignores his thoughts, and stares at the earth a long time until he's visited by effects of a seizure, and then tells over what will happen in the future. I've already seen this a few times in the far west. Also among them is one who spreads out sand and shape forms in it. This is very famous in the West. And among them as well is one who throws small stones onto a strip of leather and studies them and afterwards speaks out words. And this is well known and famous in every place that I have gone. And also among them is one who throws a long leather belt to the floor, observes it, and reveals hidden things. The intention of all of this is to stimulate the imaginative faculty with it, not that the action does something on its own or indicates a specific matter. The masses err in this, for since some of the reports are correct, they think that these actions are what indicate what will be, such as this error comes to them to the point that they think that some of these actions are the cause of what will be, like some of astrologers think. For astrology involves the same relationship, meaning that the movement of the stars are a type of stimulus of the imaginative faculty and arouse it. And hence, no two men will be the same in their revealing that which is hidden, even if they're the same in their knowledge and their discipline. And anyone who does any of these acts and other ones follow in this way is called a diviner, a kosem. And he said, let no one be among you who is a diviner. The language of the Sifrei is, what is it, kosem? It is one who holds his stick and says whether I should go or whether I should not go. And this is a famous type of stimulus at the time. The prophet Hosea says, my people consults its stick. Its rod tells it what to do. One who transgresses this negative commandment and does one of these things, meaning one who divines and speaks to people from an action that moves him, is liable for lashes. Not the one who asks the diviner. However, asking the diviner is very vile, and the regulations of this commandment have already been explained in Tractate Sanhedrin. So this came up also previously in the one about the medium. So for instance, would it be, if you ask a medium who's using one of the forbidden practices and is claiming to communicate with the dead, so if you're the asker, not the diviner, or let's say you're just watching it, are those forbidden? So though like here he's saying that the one who goes to them, it's not forbidden, but it is, he's calling it vile. and the Hebrew translation of that is miguneh ma'od. Again, that's a Hebrew translation, but it also means like vile is a good translation.
By
So,
the West, does
yeah,
he mean Spain? Is he what
I'm not
in the?
sure.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but where he depends where he is right now, because he started writing this when he had already left Spain. I think his family traveled to Israel first and then went to Egypt, but certainly the West, it makes a lot of sense that it could be Spain. He
didn't
also
mean
lived in
Colorado.
Morocco. He also lived in Morocco
Oh.
for a time being, so he might mean Morocco also. I've been reading this book which I accidentally came across. It's called, I think, The Sorcerer's Assistant, and it's the story of this guy who came across a magician. The guy was a magician who was from India, and in India they have all manner of these magicians who are street magicians who claim to have powers, but they're really just using these sort of magic tricks, which the sorcerer ends up teaching this young guy. This is a true story. The book is a true story. He studies with this guy. He learns a lot of the tricks, and a lot of the tricks involve chemicals and all sorts of things. I mean, but then he travels around India to encounter these street guys to see what they're doing and how they do what they're doing. And they're all over India. This is like a deep part of the culture in India. Sort of like when you see the guys selling snake oil kind of thing in Westerns, the guys who traveled around selling potions and stuff. Well, they have those kind of guys, but they also have these guys that will make it rain or heal people. You know, they have all these healing techniques. And, you know, he himself, having been trained by a guy who's one of the experts in this, you know, sees it for sort of for what it is. Well, these guys are really just magicians. He even makes the point at one point in his book that a lot of this book is like, let's say 20 years old or something like that. So his traveling around was maybe 30 years ago. But he was making the point that a lot of the magic they're doing is from like Houdini's time. It's not modern. It's not like modernized. It's not like David Copperfield. It's like Houdini. A lot of it is the stuff that Houdini actually did, or stuff that would have been around at the time that Houdini was doing his stuff. But they pass themselves off as miracle workers. I mean, hundreds of people will be standing in line to be healed by these guys, using their whatever it is technique. So, I mean, and that usually is how the Rambam is explaining this, but here, and he takes a long time on this one. Here, he's suggesting something different. He is suggesting that the people that are telling you what's going to happen just happen to be clever, and they pick up on details that other people are not noticing, and they're really pretty good at guessing what's going to happen. And he's suggesting that the techniques they use are to get them into the mental state where they're going to be able to guess well. So he's not even saying that. It's sort of interesting. He's not saying that the stick thing or looking at the stars or whatever they're doing is a made up technique just to fool you. He's saying it's something they do to get them into themselves into a kind of altered state. And in that altered state, they are noticing details and facts and organizing them in a way that makes them just very good at guessing what will happen. When you go to mentalists, a lot of times, especially if you go to the frum mentalists, they will emphasize this. They will say that there's no magic. I'm just using techniques that help me. And they'll say something like, I'm picking up on little clues that you wouldn't regularly notice. I don't know if they are. I think a lot of them are just tricks, but they pass their skills off as being particularly perceptive about the kinds of clues that elicit answers about what their intentions are, or what their it may be give you information about what happened in the past. But they'll say that they just have developed a kind of heightened perception and have learned the clues to look for, and that's what gives them the edge. Again, they are also manipulating you, and they're using tricks, but they'll often explain that. And there's this TV show called The Mentalist, starring Simon Baker, the Australian actor, where he uses it to solve crimes, and he's uncannily, but he'll always say there's no such thing as a psychic, because he in his younger days he had passed himself off as a psychic, but he said there really is no such thing as a psychic. He's just using these techniques of perception. It's just that the Rambam, he could have just said, don't pay attention to the stick, it's just a gimmick, but that he feels it necessary to say that the stick helps we'll call him the diviner, the kosem. The stick helps them get into the altered state, which is a state of heightened perception. Again, he says that towards the beginning. And so when he says far west, I'm not sure. It could be Spain, but it also could be Morocco. I don't know if he's already been to Morocco at the point, because he wrote this commentary, but he could have certainly revised it when he was older. He's writing it when he's young. He's writing it when he's like 20, and on the run, from Muslims in Spain. The family is sort of on the run, but it's possible he also edited it later on. So this could be information he's including from later on. But so I don't know when he was in Morocco. If this would have to be Spain, but it could be. But in India, apparently, this is like going on all the time, and also the kind of street sorcerers. Okay, that was really interesting how much time he spent on that. He prohibited us, next is 32, he prohibited us from doing actions chosen by astrology. And that is that one say the day is good for deed X and proper for doing it, or this day is foreboding regarding doing deed Y, and we should distance ourselves from doing it. And that is his maybe exalted saying, let no one be found among you, etc., is an augur. An augur, in this case, the Hebrew word that they're using in the translation ma'onain, the ma'onain. That is an explanation of the Torah. This is a word from the Torah, the ma'onain. So, and this prohibition has already been repeated. He said, you shall not practice augury, ma'onain. The language of the Sifra in Kedoshim chapter 6, verse 2 is, you shall not practice augury, te'onenu. These are those who assign a time. It comes from ona, like a time. For the expression is rooted in the term ona, meaning to say, let no one be found among you who is an augur, who says time X is good and time Y is bad. One who transgresses this negative commandment is liable for lashes, meaning the one who proclaims these times, not the one who asks about them. However, the asking is also forbidden in addition to it being something that lacks truth. So here he wants to make the point that there's nothing to it. There's nothing to this. It is not true. One who calculates his action to be at a certain time with the intention that it be successful or that the action benefit him is to be lashed as well because he did an action. And included in this prohibition is also the forbidding of the acts of magicians. All right, so what is the Hebrew word he uses for magicians? Again, it's just funny how much time he's going to spend on this. Khartoumim, that's like the language used about the Egyptians. Okay, this is just, it is a fun topic. Okay. Including this prohibition is also forbidding the act of magicians. The language of the sages is an augur. These are those who fool the eyes. So in this category, you have people like who do horoscopes, but you also have magicians. This is a large category of machination collected to sleight of hand to the point that it appears to people that one is doing things, though there's no truth to them, such as we always see. They take a rope, place it in the corner of their garments, and then they take out a snake. A person throws a ring in the air, and then they take out from their mouth, they take out from the mouth of one who's standing near them. And actions similar to this from the magic acts famous among the masses. Each one of these acts is forbidden. One who does this is called one who fools the eyes and is a type of magic, so he is lashed. Moreover, he deceives people, and the damage that comes out of this is great for showing the actualization of things that are impossible as if they are possible. When with fools, women, and children is very bad. It damages their intellect, brings them to believe that the impossible can actually be. Understand this. So this second part, if you look in the Rambam, if you look in the Shulchan Aruch, you would assume that doing sleight of hand is forbidden. But if you look at contemporary responsa, the interpretation is if you do the sleight of hand to give the impression that you have powers and that people will then buy your healing or honor you as a a powerful person, etc. So that is what's forbidden. But if you, and this is what I have several friends who practice magic as a hobby, and I remember one of them in particular, when I was in yeshiva, he was like a couple years older than me, and he practiced magic. He was instructed that he has to explain that there is no real magic, that this is sleight of hand. And then you actually have to show them how you do one of your tricks. You have to show them how you do one of your tricks, and then tell them there is no magic involved, and that is enough to be able to continue with sleight of hand. When I was in high school, there was a Purim carnival that I was involved with, and I decided I was going to have a tent that I would be dressed as a palm reader, and the sign would say, if you want, enter if you want your palm read. And red was spelled R-E-D. And then when somebody came in, they would close their eyes, they would present their palm, and I would paint their palm red with red paint. This was my booth at the Purim Carnival. Somebody, one of the older guys in the yeshiva, heard that this was my plan, and he decided to tell the Rosh Yeshiva about it, because he felt that palm reading is in the category of things that you are not allowed to do. And so Rav Aaron called me in, and he told me that when I do this, there has to be a sign outside that says that there is no actual magic involved in this. There is no disclaimer. But clearly, if I had the disclaimer, then it was okay. Obviously, once the whole thing is finished, they know it was a joke. The whole thing was a joke. But apparently, even for a joke, Rav Aaron held you have to have a disclaimer. And you'll even see it with the mentalists. Almost all of, I think all the mentalists that are from do this. They make it their point at the beginning to say there's nothing about this. It's like skill and sleight of hand and tricks. And then I think they have to show you how they do one of them. I'm pretty sure. But again, you could see why this would be a pernicious problem. This guy's book, I mean, it wasn't an expose. The guy was just, he himself was fascinated by this whole thing. He trained in it, and he was just talking about what's there. But you see that he has there's photographs in the book of hundreds of people waiting for cures for the most serious diseases, thinking that this guy's going to be able to do it because he just made it rain, when the way he made it rain was that he had some guy with a hose behind the crowd, spritzing mist in the air over the people, so he's just a magician, but he's using it to fool the masses, and it's dangerous. The other thing, which he hasn't over here really emphasized, the idolatrous implications, that it could be connected to idolatry, but and especially that if people start believing in a human like magician, then they turn to the magician instead of turning to God, for their ailments. By the way, this was even considered a problem with doctors, that if the Torah hadn't permitted, we saw there's even a Ramban about it. It could go even farther, but generally everybody seems to agree that if the Torah had not permitted doctoring, then it would be problematic to seek out a doctor for healing, because God is the healer. So why would you be seeking out a doctor? It would seem like it was almost in this category of problem if you're seeking out a doctor, especially for much of history where they couldn't really show you any science behind what they're doing. But the Torah does permit going to a doctor And but even then, there's a Gemara that says that there were several things that Chizkiyahu, the king, did, and the rabbis praised him. There were some things he did and they didn't praise him, but one of them was that he hid this book of healing. They had a book of healing, and he was concerned that people were starting to believe that the healing comes from the book and the healing doesn't come from God. So he hid the book so people would again turn to God for healing. And you could hear that this is a complicated subject. It's not an easy subject, or at least a subtle subject. Which
Rabbi?
is remembering that God's behind everything and not thinking that it's just people. Yes, Sam.
So where does it say in the Torah that doctors are okay?
So it says v'rapo yirape. It even says it in
The morning prayers?
Exodus. No, it's in Exodus, in the Torah portion of Mishpatim, when it's talking about. I'll tell you exactly. Look at it right now. So this is, it's in Exodus chapter 1. And the Gemara cites this verse as the source that doctors can heal. So it's 21:19. And I'm going to look here. I'm not going to, if I take us off this thing, I'll never find our way back. You know what? It's 11:34, so I can do it. All right, we're going to go back to here. We're going to go to here. Why does this always happen? I touch it and then it goes weird. It goes backwards. Go phone. So this is the verse. It starts, when two parties quarrel and one strikes the other with a stone or a fist, and the victim doesn't die but takes to his bed. If that victim then gets up and walks outdoors upon a staff, the assailant shall go unpunished, except for paying for the idleness and the healing and the cure. So in Hebrew, it's v'nikah hamakeh. So if this guy was injured, but then he gets up and he's able to walk around afterwards, and go about his business, he's no longer responsible. If several days later the guy dies, then he's not going to get the death penalty. But he has to pay for the fact that the guy couldn't work, and he has to pay for his medical bills. V'rapo yirape. Let's just look here.
Okay. I just wanted an idea of where it was,
Right. So this is where it is in Exodus 21:19. And then the Talmud, just look here. Bavakama Brachos. This is it. Abaye said, one should not say this as it was taught in the school of Rabbi Shmuel, that from the verse, and shall cause him to be thoroughly healed, from here we derive the permission is granted for a doctor to heal. The practice of medicine is in accordance with the will of God. So that's this verse plus this Gemara over here. And if we kept on going, we would find it mentioned in Shulchan Aruch. But that's typically cited as a source. All right. I look forward to learning with you guys on Monday. And I'm very grateful to be able to learn with you today.
Could I put a footnote in?
Please.
When we were talking especially about astrology, so
Yeah.
if you have an astrologer with the diviner and says, don't go out today, don't go out tomorrow, or something like that. Okay, so you say that, that's wrong. But what if, but like Chazal, they believed in the power of Muslim, that, Mars had something, it made you bloody. They did believe that that the way that God causally operates the world, he does it through the intermediaries of the Muslim. I believe that that's one of the views.
Right. I think even the Rambam takes note of that. Certainly the Gemara is filled with it. The Rambam says there is no truth to any prognostications based on it. The question is, if you go backwards to talk about a person's nature. So I remember that there would be people that would go to frum astrologers, and their explanation for why they were allowed to go to frum astrologers is that the frum astrologers don't predict based on astrology, but they will tell you about your nature and origins, etc., using astrology, and that somehow that is permitted. I don't know. It's possible the Rambam himself makes that distinction. The Gemara certainly says if you're born under this, it's a Gemara in Shabbos, I think it's in Shabbos. The Gemara says if you're born under the sign, under Mars, whatever that means to be born under Mars, you will be a bloodletter, but you can choose what type. You could be a moil or a shoichet. You don't have to be a killer. And that's an off-quoted Gemara. Again, I don't know if the Rambam agrees with that or not. This area about whether magic is real or sorcery is real or astrology is real. This is one of those areas that the Rambam received sharp criticism from others about, because he insisted, but I don't know if he made a distinction, because he does talk about the influence of the planets and the stars, even in his codes, he talks about it. So he does recognize that there is an influence, but I don't know how he distinguishes between that and this.
I believe, that at some point that he said, if an astrologer comes up to you and says, "Don't go out today," you probably shouldn't go out today.
No, he said you're not allowed to listen to it. He just said there's no truth to it. That's what we just read. He said you're not allowed to listen to it.
I know, but the thing is that psychologically you're gonna whatever.
That I don't know. That I don't know. Like if you went to him,
but you didn't go to him. He came to you. He came to you.
No, I'm saying if you went to the Rambam.
Oh,
I'm sure. I have a feeling the Rambam would just say there's no truth to it. Go out and do the opposite. I have a feeling he might have said that to the guy, because he there's also a teaching point to this thing, is he wants it to be clear to people there's no emes in it, there's no truth in it, and he is saying that you are going to get, not for not doing something you can't get lashes, but still he's saying it's a violation of this prohibition to act or not act based on what an astrologer says. So I know what you're saying. You're saying that there could be, it's almost like the self-fulfilling prophecy. Yes, kind of self-fulfilling prophecy kind of thing. But but I don't know. The Rambam might feel like this is a good learning moment. He's going to show you
Yes.
that it's not
I
true.
think you're right.
Yeah.
I think you're
All
right.
right.
Thank you.
Okay.